Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we've got a really fascinating analysis to get into, taking us right to the heart of Iranian history and its modern resistance movement.
That's right. We're focusing on the latest uprisings, specifically the one known as the Qiyam-e-Dema 1404.
The 1404
Yeah,
Uprising.
exactly. And our mission really is to look past the day-to-day headlines and try to understand the, let's call it the historical infrastructure of this resistance.
So we're looking at the DNA of the movement.
Precisely. The sources we were diving into try to identify how this current wave is actually different from all the ones that came before it. What painful lessons have finally been learned and applied.
Okay, so let's just jump right into the foundational argument then. The analysis basically says that over the last 120 years, the Iranian resistance has always had the same democratic goal.
Right, that's the constant.
But the big insight here, the thing that's supposedly different now, is that the 1404 uprising is finally using the necessary, what does the analysis call it? The tools for struggle.
Tashkent organization. That's the core thesis. If you look back 120 years, you've got the Constitutional Revolution, Mossadegh's movement in the 50s, the 79 revolution.
Right.
You find this common denominator, a Makaraj and Moshtarak.
And what does that common denominator actually look like? What are these demands that just never seem to go away?
Well, it's always been about one core thing: a free, prosperous, and democratic Iran. And the sources are clear. This isn't some vague wish. It's a specific checklist.
Like what?
Gender equality, popular sovereignty, meaning the ballot box is the final word, an independent judiciary, freedom of the press, and critically, the right for Iran's diverse ethnic groups to self-govern within a unified democratic country.
And the sources connect this all the way to the present day.
They do. They point out that these historical demands are pretty much perfectly reflected in the 10-point plan from the Iranian resistance's president-elect, Mariam Rajavi.
Yeah.
They see it as the logical next step in a century-long fight.
So if the goals haven't changed in over a century, the method had to. That brings us to the really tough question. Why did all those other movements fail, despite all the sacrifice?
It comes back to that one deficit we mentioned, the lack of genuine Tashkent. The analogy the sources use is just perfect.
Yeah.
A carpenter cannot build a house with a chef's goals.
And political struggle needs its own specific tools.
Exactly. It needs a tough, disciplined, and totally independent political organization that can actually go the distance against a brutal tyranny.
And when you look at history that way, the failures become, well, they become painfully obvious.
You really do.
Let's take the Constitutional Revolution. It achieved so much, but the sources argue it just didn't have that internal structure to protect its wins. So by 1920, it's basically just handed over by an English general to a Russian Cossack general.
Reza Khan, yeah. Or think about Mossadegh in 1953. His government was so vulnerable because it lacked independence. The Tudeh party, the communists, were a huge force back then.
But they weren't independent.
Not at all. There's this famous anecdote that if it started raining in Moscow, the Tudeh party members would open their umbrellas in Tehran.
Wow.
So when the CIA-backed coup happened, they just vanished. They turned their backs on Mossadegh, and the people were left with no leadership on the streets.
And that leads to the biggest tragedy, 1979. After decades of incredible sacrifice from intellectuals, from groups founded by people like Hanif Nejad and Jazani, the nation paid this huge price, only to have the revolution stolen.
Handed over to, as the resistance leader is quoted, a dinosaur from the depths of history.
Ah.
It just shows how easily an organized minority can snatch a revolution from a disorganized majority.
So all that history points to one conclusion.
It dictates the tool you need. The analysis argues that success demands an organization that is 100% politically and financially independent, one that relies only on its own people, has a revolutionary leadership, and has absorbed all the lessons of the last 120 years.
And that organizational maturity is what supposedly makes the 1404 uprising different.
According to this research, yes. That's the key.
That sets the stage perfectly. So if we know the historical problem was the missing tool, how do the sources trace the journey to actually building it? Let's start with 2009.
Right, 2009 or 88 in the Iranian calendar. You see a clear learning curve. It started pretty modestly, protests over a stolen vote. But the people on the street radicalized so fast.
Faster than their leader.
Way faster. They immediately started with anti-government slogans, bypassing the initial moderate figures. But it was spontaneous. It just didn't have the organizational depth to survive the crackdown.
Okay, fast forward to 2017. That one started with economic anger, death to high prices.
It did, but the speed and the sheer scale were completely different. It spread to something like 200 cities, almost every province, almost overnight.
And this is where the big political shift happens.
This is the moment. If 2009 was about a stolen vote, 2017 was when the people on the street completely shattered the regime's longest-running political game.
You're talking about the whole reformist versus hardliner thing, that false choice they've been selling for decades?
Exactly that. The idea that you can vote for the lesser evil. That whole illusion was it was broken. The defining slogan was, reformist, hardliner, the game is over. The people were done with it.
And the analysis claims the regime's intelligence ministry knew right away that their old playbook was dead.
They knew, and they pivoted immediately to what the sources call the Pahlavi Project.
The Pahlavi Project.
Yeah, the analysis alleges that they started planting their own militia, the Basij, in the protests, and their instruction was to chant, Reza Shah, your soul is happy.
So a deliberate attempt to redirect the anger back toward monarchy, toward another form of inherited power.
A way to dilute the democratic demand. And this happens at the exact same time the organized resistance calls for the creation of rebellious units, the Kanuni Sharishi, inside Iran.
An organized response to an organized countermove.
Precisely. And by 2019, you see the impact of those units. That uprising was super organized, very radical, very disciplined. But maybe the speed got ahead of the popular support. It was a bit limited geographically.
Which brings us to 2022. The Zina Amini uprising. That one got huge global media attention for gender apartheid.
It did, but the analysis points to a critical failure. The message abroad never really got past that. It didn't convey that the entire system had to go.
And that allowed other people to step in.
It opened the door. All that external political drama, the Massa statement, the Georgetown meeting with a few self-appointed figures, it completely diverted the media's attention from the real organized fight happening inside Iran. The narrative got hijacked.
Okay, so that brings us right up to the present. If that whole decade was the learning curve, what are the specific qualitative leaps that define the 1404 uprising itself?
Well, 1404 shows the organization firing on all cylinders. Right. First, you have the speed and breadth. It kicks off in the bazaar, and then bam, it's in the universities, it's across different social classes all over the country.
And the second point?
Zero illusions. This is crucial. The entire corrupt system is the target now. You don't see any demands aimed at, say, one branch of government or another. They are only expressing what they don't want. They aren't there to ask for reforms.
That rejection of the status quo is what makes it so inherently radical.
Absolutely. The sources say the movement immediately shut down calls for softer, less confrontational actions like, turning off your lights or not paying your bills.
Things pushed by some figures outside Iran.
Right. The people on the street were not interested. They are there for regime change, full stop.
And the slogans make that crystal clear. They're rejecting both paths from the past, the monarchy and the clergy.
You've got it. The dominant slogans tell the whole story. Death to the oppressor, whether Shah or leader. It couldn't be clearer. And then there's the year is the year of blood. Sayyid Ali is overthrown. It is a total rejection of any kind of hereditary or tyrannical power.
And the analysis goes even further.
It does. It states that since the start of 1404, the conflict is now realistically an armed liberation struggle. It claims these rebellious units have conducted tens of thousands of operations between 2022 and 2024, keeping the flame alive. They're seen as the core platoons that will eventually become a national liberation army.
That's a huge claim. And at the same time, as the movement radicalizes internally, it's getting this unprecedented level of global support.
It's a night and day difference from 1979. Back then, the Shah was handing out huge bribes. There's a famous story of a $25 million loan to Sweden for their metro system.
And yet, the Western media still ignored the revolution.
Pretty much. Now, you have what the sources call a tsunami of support. You've got global figures, parliamentarians from over 40 countries, prime ministers, even the German chancellor saying the regime has lost its legitimacy.
So what is the resistance asking for with all this support?
Well, they're very specific. The support is good, but it's not enough. They want countries to close Iranian embassies, expel their diplomat terrorists, and completely de-recognize the regime.
And legally.
Refer the human rights file to the UN Security Council and lift the political immunity for leaders like Khamenei and Radan so they can be prosecuted in international courts.
Now, this is where the analysis gets really interesting because it warns about the danger of external manipulation. Specifically, this idea of projecting a leader from abroad, like the Trump-Pahlavi dynamic.
There's a historical rule here, according to the sources.
Yeah.
No foreign power has ever spent a single dime for the benefit of the Iranian people without extracting a price later.
1953.
1953. Or the foreign powers that helped Khomeini return in 1979. Relying on foreign military intervention, which some people advocate for, it just guts the real power of the people. It's a strategy for those who want to rule people, not serve them.
And the analysis has a really specific, incredible detail about how the people inside Iran reacted to this danger during the 1404 uprising.
This is one of the most crucial points. The sources say that the Kurdish, Azeri, and Sistan and Baluchistan provinces, the people who suffer the most, they actually held back at the start of the 1404 uprising.
Right.
Because they feared the Pahlavi project. They feared the return of another inherited centralized power. They only joined in full force after that slogan, "Death to the oppressor," whether Shah or leader, became dominant across the country.
So that slogan was a signal to them.
It was confirmation that the external monarchist project had failed to hijack this revolution.
That is amazing. It speaks to a level of political consciousness that is just wow. But it brings up a question for the listener. If this organization is so strong, why don't we hear people in the street chanting its name or for its leaders?
That's a great question, and it gets to a core principle of the organization. The concept is called elesivia. It basically means being immaterial or non-sectarian when it comes to praise.
So focus on the substance, not the brand name.
Exactly. Prioritize the essence, the rasm, over the name, the essism. The resistance is actively against group worship or sectarism and self-promotion.
It's a strategic choice.
It is. The goal is for everyone to feel like a serious fighter, to be resilient and brave, no matter who they personally support. They'd rather have the whole country adopt their core regime-ending slogans, like "Death to the principle of Vilayat-e Faqih," than chant their leaders' names. Using the slogan is using their tool.
Which suggests some maturity that was completely absent in 1979. So let's tie it all together. Why can't this revolution be stolen again?
Because the single biggest factor in the 1979 theft was the lack of a clear democratic alternative. There was a vacuum. The leaders were let out of prison just days before the Shah fell. The organization was brand new. Today, it's the polar opposite.
They're prepared.
They're prepared. The analysis is emphatic on this point. The movement has political consciousness, it has organization, it has 60 years of experience fighting two different dictatorships, defined political programs, huge internal support, and real international backing.
They are too experienced to let that vacuum open up again.
That's the argument. The 1404 uprising has already shown it can't be derailed by the intelligence ministry's proxy projects, like the Pahlavi alternative. This revolution, the sources say, is unstealable because there is an alternative ready to go.
So the analysis concludes that this is a major turning point, a ton to pitch. You have the totalitarian regime using its absolute maximum force and the revolutionaries using their absolute maximum courage and organization, a head-on collision.
And you can even think of it as a law of physics, a system that has reached its maximum compression. Its enjubez, where every part of society is securitized, is guaranteed to release with massive force once a single crack appears.
That's a powerful image.
The regime can crush many uprisings, but it only needs to fail once, just once.
Yeah.
The uprising, on the other hand, can regroup over and over, and each time it comes back stronger, more organized, and more experienced.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. The analysis really suggests that the true key to victory here isn't foreign money or external power. It's the individual commitment by every single person to what they call organizational presence. It's the difference between simply wanting freedom and actively building the tool required to achieve it.